And you're
What?
just like, what? It was the weirdest way I think you could possibly tell someone that their child has dwarfism.
Hi, I'm Madeline Cheney, and you are listening to episode 19 of The Rare Life, the story of Claire. This conversation is with her mother, Katie. Katie is hilarious, and she's very real. Everyone needs a Katie in their life. In this episode, Katie shares all about her daughter, Claire, who is 4 years old. She talks about who Claire is, her pregnancy with her birth, and she shares what it was like to receive Claire's lethal diagnosis shortly after birth. There's definitely a trigger warning for this episode. Please listen with caution. Katie also shares how she has changed for the better because of Claire. Story time. About 2 years ago, I was with Kimball at the doctor's office, and his pediatrician mentioned that she had a patient with another form of chondrodysplasia punctata, and I was in total desperation to connect with other special needs parents. I hadn't really met any since Kimball had been born. So I asked her if she would give Katie my name and number, because I knew I wasn't allowed to have any information from her because of HIPAA. And Katie called me, and thus began our friendship. And I am so grateful for her boldness and her willingness to support me at that time. Katie and her husband Nathan live with their 4-year-old daughter Claire, our superstar for these episodes, and their infant son Will. Katie is a lover of ice cream and true crime. Let's get on to our conversation. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to talk to you again.
Yeah.
It's always nice, special needs parents unite.
Yes. It's great to reconnect. Yeah, totally. So let's start out with talking about Claire. Can you explain a little bit about who she is and what she is like, as well as like her medical challenges?
Yeah, so just kind of a little background. My daughter Claire is 4 years old. When she was born, she was diagnosed with a condition called rhizomelic chondrodysplasia punctata type 1, and that is a huge mouthful. So I'm just going to refer to it as RCDP going forward, because it's like so much easier to say. And okay,
Totally.
But that's it. So rhizomelic chondrodysplasia, RCDP, same thing.
Got it.
Anyway, so she was diagnosed with RCDP after she was born. And that is a rare and lethal form of dwarfism. It affects 100 individuals worldwide. It affects the physical growth of the body as well as mental intelligence.
Okay.
So it's just a really quick background. So anyway, so she was 4 years old, and she is crazy. Like, I know people might think, wow, a kid that can't walk and they can't talk and you have to do everything for them. They should be a piece of cake. That is not true. Besides, on top of all of her medical needs, which, some days can be more demanding than others. I mean, she is sassy. So she loves music, but she will cry if there's a song that she hears that she does not like. And it's like in 2 seconds. So if you don't get there, you're done. And she's just going to cry for the next 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And you're going to roll your eyes and go, you're so dramatic. Like, oh my gosh, what are you thinking? And she loves lights. She loves, even though she can't move on her own, if you spin her as fast as she can, I don't know how she doesn't get dizzy. And she just laughs and giggles. And she kicks her little legs that she wants more. And it's really tiring. I'm like, dang, for a kid that has all these needs, you're wearing me out.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
That's so, I remember when you came over to our apartment when we first met, and you had her in her car seat. It was like an infant car seat with the rear facing, and you were swinging her like crazy, and you're like, oh, she's an adrenaline junkie. And I was like, oh, and she seemed to love it. I remember that about her.
Yeah. So it's hard because you've seen her, so you know how tiny she is.
Yeah.
But for those who can't see her, so she's 4 years old, but she's in 18-month clothing.
Oh, wow.
So I bring that up, like where you're saying the big movements, because like there's been times where the car seat we're going crazy and we're flinging her around because yeah, she's small, but she's still 4 years old.
Right.
And my mom my mom or my sister was like, oh my gosh, don't do that in public. People are gonna think you're like throwing your baby around and like someone's gonna call the cops on you.
Oh,
I'm like,
man.
nope, she's 4 years old. This is what she likes to do.
Yeah.
Even though she's infant size, she's still 4 years old.
Right.
You can't, as much as outside people sometimes, like, you know, for special needs parents to say your kid has to do this or this and this. You know your kid, you know what they want.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can roll your eyes really big and get frustrated when people tell you, ooh, don't do that. And you're like, whatever. Like, this is a great quality of life for my kid. They're happy. You're not doing anything dangerous.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. You know, you have to help them live the best life they're going to have.
Yeah.
And part of that for Claire is being really wild and crazy.
Yeah.
And just like any 4-year-old, lately we've actually been having a battle. I don't think she's been like she will let me know, like, Mom, leave me alone. I'm like, okay. I won't look at you. I'll leave you alone. I will put on your show for you to watch for a little bit.
Interesting. And
she's gotten kind of like a little attitude lately. I love it, but I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
You're kind of, you know, growing up a little bit.
Yeah. And she's nonverbal, right?
Correct. Yes. But she definitely has let us know what she wants. And I think that's a really special thing for a lot of parents with their nonverbal children, is that, you know, that secret communication you learn. Yeah. That, right, others might not pick up, and you're like, no, I can tell exactly what she wants.
That's so
I can't explain it. I see it in her eyes. I see what she wants. I know that little gesture of her fingers. I know what those little kicks of her legs mean, right? She wants this. She wants to be left alone. And just like any kid crying, you're like, okay, I'll leave you be.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So this past year, Claire became a big sister. She had her little brother, Will, was born when she was 3.5. That's been really fun for me to watch because I wasn't really sure, you know, with her abilities and with, you know, I know I said earlier that RCDP affects the mental intelligence. And, you know, you can't 100% measure these kids in intelligence, but when she was diagnosed, what they told us was she was probably only ever at most going to progress to a level of like a 6-month-old.
Oh, okay.
So just even with that, you know, you're just like, how would a 6-month-old, you know, interpret a new sibling?
Yeah.
On top of these other things, but it's been really fun to just kind of watch her, you know, learn to love him in her own way, you know, and it's really cute that if she catches him, look at her, she'll smile and laugh at him. And I can tell, even when the times I put them together, which is scary for me because he likes to go for her feeding tube, and
oh yeah,
that just scares me that he's gonna pull it out, and then, you know, you got a mess on your hand. And no one likes to do an emergency G-tube change.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like nightmare.
I know, the first time that happens, it's like terrifying, right?
Yeah. Like they warned me about this.
The first time it happened to us was actually in public, and it was like, oh no. My gosh, like, oh, in front of all these other kids, and it was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my
gosh. Anyway.
It is so scary.
It really is, though. So anyway, so that happened. Claire became a big sister. She started school, which was like amazing for us. You know, like when they're diagnosing Claire and they're telling you all these things, like, I know I said it was a lethal form, which means, you know, obviously she doesn't have a long life. Well, we don't know, right? No one knows how long their child will live for, but it they told us, 10 years is kind of a max. 5 years is considered a long-term survivor. Most likely you'll get 2 to 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So even just the thought of school was not even on our radar. I mean, when she was first born, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, would she even live long enough for that opportunity to go to school?
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, sometimes you pray for a lot of miracles and you don't get the one you get, but when you get the ones you don't ask for, like going to school, which I know a lot of parents might think is just something given, but like to us, that was a miracle. And to just see her love school. And I do think it's been more of a benefit to her life than I thought it would.
Oh. So I would love to go back to when you first got Claire's diagnosis. And it sounds like, did you know that anything was abnormal about her body before she was born, or was that all after she was born?
Yes. We did know that something wasn't measuring correctly. So I got pregnant, and then at the 20-week scan, which if anyone has ever been pregnant, that's a scan where they go in, they take body measurements with the ultrasound, right? They look at the fetus, and if you want to, they can usually tell you the gender of the baby, right? That's like the big 20-week scan.
Right.
So as they are measuring, they measure and they tell us, okay, you're having a girl. And, that's really exciting. And then, I don't know, it's hard. I'll tell you this. It's like if an ultrasound tech is ever like, I need to go talk to someone.
Red flag.
It kind of, you're like, I don't think that's like typical. So she went out.
Yeah.
And then the doctor who's kind of behind the scenes supervising the ultrasound, he came in and he said, hi, so her humerus is measuring a little further behind than we would like. And at first, and we're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And you said, but, why don't you come back in 4 weeks? Because he says, I'm sure it's nothing. If anything, maybe that means that we just got your due date wrong.
Oh, okay.
So I came back at 24 weeks and they took the measurements, and I don't know. I feel like you just kind of know something's up. If the ultrasound tech isn't talking to you and then they leave and then a doctor comes in with a big book to talk to you, you're just like, oh my gosh. And you just, know, and your heart like plummets because you're just like, what is going on? And you do feel blindsided. And I don't think that's bad or wrong. I think it's just right in your mind. You've pictured this child and all of a sudden you're like, what is going to change this vision of my child that I was imagining in my head?
Yes.
And she said, and I'll never forget it because even now I just think it is like the weirdest way to tell someone this. She looked at both of us and she said, do you guys watch Game of Thrones?
What?
And we went, what? Like, I mean, you're just like, huh?
What is going on?
She's like, well, there's an actor on that show and he has dwarfism. And we think your daughter has the same dwarfism as that actor, achondroplasia. And you're just like, what? Like, again, it was the weirdest way I think you could possibly tell someone that their child has dwarfism.
Yeah.
It'd be like if I found out I had cancer and the doctor's like, have you ever watched Grey's Anatomy? There's an episode of someone who has cancer. Like, it was so...
That is really weird.
I know. And we were just like, okay. So they tell us, right? They're like, we think she's achondroplasia. Now, achondroplasia is the most common form of dwarfism.
Right.
Right. There's over 200 kinds. And this is like 80% of people who have dwarfism have the ACON dwarfism.
Right.
And we were asking them all these questions, like, how sure are you about this? And I'm like, no, we're sure. We've never been wrong ever. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they're like, okay, bye. Well, me and my husband were just alone in this room, and we're like, what? Like, what just happened?
Wow.
Like, and I think back now, and there's a very much before and after of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like a divide, like who I was before that moment and who I was after. And I'm never going to be the same person I was before. Like, things about my life have radically changed just from that moment of something isn't the way you thought it was going to be with your child's health. So going forward, we had ultrasounds like every 4 weeks, and they were just like, man, she's so small. We cannot figure this out. And I'm going to tell you this, go with your gut, because I felt like she did not have achondroplasia.
Interesting.
Like, I would look at the ultrasounds. I'll tell you, doctors are really great and have a lot of information, but they're not going to spend the like 6 hours a day you will every day, right, researching this condition and everything, and just feeling like this isn't right. Like, these things they're measuring are not adding up to, you know, their predicted diagnosis. And they were like, she's so small, we can't figure it out. And they were like, wow, like, you are at such a high risk of her being a stillborn. Like, you know, we really hope she makes it, kind of a thing. So then there's, on top of that, you're like, oh my gosh, my kid, you know, something's going on. And then it's like, are they even going to make it?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, are they going to make it? They're telling us all this stuff. And again, I was just like, are you sure? And they said, yes, we are completely sure. And I was like, and again, I just was like, I didn't want to seem like I knew anything better than them. And cause I was like, I'm not a doctor. This isn't my world, but I just felt like that's not what she had. And in fact, in my own research, I came across RCDP.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, I think this is what she has.
Wow.
Like, I remember telling Nate, like, I think this is a better fit to what she has. But it was like, we wouldn't know. And then we got switched to another doctor, who delivers kind of these like high risk, maybe like genetically abnormal pregnancies, who I think she's probably delivered like every special needs kid in Utah. And after just one ultrasound with her, she was like, yeah, I don't think there's achondroplasia. And I felt so validated at that moment. Yeah. I was like, I knew it. Like, just for months, I knew it. But then she's like, but I don't know. I don't know what it is. She's like, I have a couple guesses, but I don't know. We're just going to have to wait till she's born. And I'll tell you, I know it sounds weird not to have a diagnosis, but that I don't know in some ways was more comforting than like people keep telling you this diagnosis that you felt like was wrong. And it just felt like this doctor was really honest with me, was like, we don't know. But, you know, I don't have to just give you a diagnosis to just make you feel better. Like, so that actually felt really great to be like, I'm in the same boat with you. Right. I don't know. And I'm, this whole time during my pregnancy, I'm getting non-stress tests because, as I said earlier, they were very concerned with, you know, how small she was and just high risk for stillborns and stuff. So I'm doing those twice a week from 24 weeks on. So she was induced 1 week early. And then, so she was born. And I didn't even hold her because my husband and Claire and some doctors, they rushed her over to cardiology. Oh. Because they thought they had seen something on a fetal echo. Oh. And they just want to make sure. And she didn't have anything, thank goodness. But I'm like, I didn't see my kid for like 4 hours. So it was like just me alone, like in this hospital room, and just like wondering, like, what does she have?
Yeah.
You know, what's going on? And then she came back, and we kind of got a little time as a family, and then and they took her to get x-rays, and this is still day one. And then that night they thought she was having what they thought were seizures. So they took her to like go get all hooked up for EEG. And then they're like, yeah, we didn't record any seizures. So we're like, okay, that's great. Because of that, they transferred her to the NICU.
Okay.
And even though she was 6 pounds when she was born, she was still like the biggest baby in the NICU, because those babies are so tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's in the NICU, and then the geneticist and his fellow were like, hey, we want to come talk to you guys. And we're like, okay. And they're like, we want to talk to you in this private room. And then that's like when your heart goes again. You're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Wasn't good. Like, if you can't tell me in front of other people,
it's not good. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, you know.
Yeah.
And they're talking to us, and they're telling us, like, here's what we see on these x-rays. We've taken her blood which will give us the definitive diagnosis. But based on what we see in the x-rays, because of some calcium deposits in her joints, just the way her bones have grown, and I guess they'd seen it before. They said, we think she has this condition called rhizomelic chondrodysplasia punctata. And I said, do you mean the rhizo kids? And the doctor said, how do you know what that is? And I said, because that's what I thought she had.
That's
and then
so interesting.
Again, and here's the thing is, I already know what it is. Like, I know it's a terminal disease. So I'm already like, oh my gosh. And I know my husband doesn't really know, but I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Because you know what that means.
And again, if any doctor should be listening, don't do this. Don't say to the person, oh, well, will you explain what it is?
Oh, like, is that what they said?
Yeah. They said, well, why don't you explain what it is? And I was like, I just said, no, why don't you explain what it is? Because I'm like about to cry, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, you just shouldn't put that burden on someone being like, here's me and my non-medical stuff. I'm going to tell you what this is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of a weird thing to say to someone. Yeah. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Like, no, I'm going to deal with my emotions while you talk about
it. It's like, this is not the time to like make this a lesson, a learning lesson. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a teaching hospital, but this is not a teaching moment.
Like, save it.
Right. Exactly. I think that's one thing in all of her appointments going forward I hated, was when doctors like would have all these people, and it's still, all these emotions are still so fresh, and you're like, oh my gosh. And like doctors come in, they're like, why don't you explain it to these residents what it is? And you're like, I don't want to. I'm tired of this. Yeah. I'm so emotional. Please don't make me do this.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway. So we tell us what it is. As I stated earlier in the podcast, right? It's like a terminal form of dwarfism, lifespan, kind of here's what can be expected for, gross motor function, things she might be able to do. And then they just push a box of tissues towards you, and they're like, we'll leave you alone. Which, again, I just feel like is not, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't know the best way to deliver news that like your child has this terminal diagnosis, but I just don't think that's one of them, is just saying, here's what she has, pushing a tissue box towards you and saying, we'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
I think we just kind of sat in like stunned silence for like 4 or 5 minutes. And we're like, it's so like shattering, just everything. It's like, I'm going to like cry. Sorry, just like thinking about it again. Like, we're like 4 years past, but those moments are just still so real. At this moment, in your life, where your life is never going to be the same again. your dreams have just died. And you're told this kid that you, like, you know, just gave birth to and love is going to die, and there's nothing you can do about it. And again, I mean, I don't really like talking about this moment or thinking about it, because as, like, you know, as long ago as it was, it's still like, when I think about it, it still feels as fresh to me as the day when I remember, like, everything. I remember what people were wearing. I remember, like, the color of the carpet. I remember everything about that moment. And like I had said earlier, you know, like, those before and afters, and I just knew, like, I will never get that before, and my life is going to be this after moment. And you just know in that moment, like, I'm just going to dedicate everything I have to this kid that I just met yesterday. And, like, you know, I just love her so much. And I'll tell you this, like, yeah, hearing she was disabled and stuff, like, that really sucked, because you have this image of your kid. And I think anyone who says, like, oh, if you cry because your kid has a disability, that's ridiculous. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's not because you don't love them and you don't think they're as valuable as someone else. It's just, you know, you had this dream of what your kid was going to be. And those things over time will absolutely fade. Like, I don't care that Claire can't ride a bike. Like, I just, that means nothing to me anymore, because I know that riding a bike doesn't make her life great, or doesn't make someone's life bad, right? Like, oh, just because she can't read a book, that doesn't make her life terrible.
Right.
But, you know, when they tell you, like, your kid is going to die, and they were like, you'll be lucky to get 2 years. I honestly, I was like, I don't even care that she has a disability. I just care that she's going to die. Like, I would take care of her for 80 years if she was so severely disabled. Like, I wouldn't even care. Like, that doesn't even matter to me. So, you know, but I mean, that is probably going to be, like, one of the top 3 worst moments of my life. And like I say, I just don't even really like going there, because not because I'm ignoring it or I choose not to do it. It's just, it's like I said, even now, 4 years later, I'm like bawling about it, because it's just so fresh. Like, it's still, it's such a vivid moment that it still feels like you're getting the news all over again. And for me, I just think it was such a big blow also, because I felt like, oh my gosh, we did it. You know, she wasn't a stillborn. We did it. We made it to birth. We can conquer anything she has. And then it kind of felt like, well, that didn't even matter.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't even matter that, you know, she made it, because she's going to die anyway. And I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but that's what it feels like in the moment. It was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
And then it sucked to call your family members and be like, so here's the deal. Our kid's going to die. And I'm like, that really sucked. And then you go, and then, so we left the room, and you just go, and you're in the NICU, and, you know, we're bawling, we're both like crying our eyes out. And we're just like, oh, like, I don't even know what to think. Like, I can't have a rational thought in my brain. And just this fear, you know, like, she's going to go, and you don't know. And so we were in the hospital for 1 week. I think they just didn't know, you know, even if she'd make it a week, and was like, well, let's just do what we can do for her. Let's run all these tests, right? Let's figure out if she can eat. And we found out, you know, she would need a feeding tube. And they looked at her eyes, and she had cataracts, which is another common characteristic of kids with RCDP. But just that first week, like, I'm sorry, like, it was hell. It was just absolutely horrible. Totally. And I felt like it was even worse that you're in the hospital, because, like, we were on such a mission to make her life so, like, beautiful. And it just felt like we want to get home and start living our life with her.
Yeah.
But we just, you know, we're antsy to leave. We're antsy to get out of there.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of those diagnoses. And, you know, it was like rough. It was very rough. Like I think now, and I'm like, it was just this terrible blur of love and grief. And just like, now I'm thinking about, I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even think I took a shower for like 2 weeks. Like, I just, even now, it really was just such a blur. And we were so tired, not just like new parents tired, but your new parent tired, your grief tired.
Yeah.
I mean, I cried a lot. I cried a lot, especially probably those like first 2 months. I cried a lot.
Yeah.
And like, this sounds really stupid, but I was thinking about it the other day. Just, you know, moments that are kind of like weird and defining that are really small. So Claire was like 4 weeks old maybe. And my family, was going to go out to lunch, like 20 minutes away from my house. And there had been a miscommunication. And I thought it was at a different time. And they were like, no, it's at this time. They're like, well, you need to come right now. Like, you come, like, we're not waiting for you. We got to come right now. And I remember looking at Claire, and she's hooked up to a feeding pump. And, right, we have a time, like she gets this much dosage, this long, over this amount of time. And she has her suction machine because she has all these secretions and medicines. And I'm hooked up to a pump for breast milk. And I was just like, we can't make it, because I was like, right. I'm like, she's not done with her feeding. She's not this. And I know that sounds so stupid, because I hung up the phone and I just started bawling. And it wasn't that I missed a lunch. Like, I don't care about that. I don't care that I missed a lunch. Okay. I wasn't upset because I wasn't being fed. I remember just like crying because I just felt like nothing in my life, something as normal as meeting my family for lunch 20 minutes away, has now become this huge thing, and I can't go because it is so not even in the realm of a possibility for me at this moment. And it's not just because I'm a tired new parent. It was like, I just can't juggle all this stuff. And I can't be like these typical moms who can be like, oh, lunch? Sure. Put your baby in a car seat, go out. And again, I know that sounds really stupid, but I just like cried about it for 2 hours because I felt so alone. I felt like, man, like, even just like, I love my family, but I felt so disconnected to them. Like, my life is so different than they will ever know from this moment on. Like, they will never understand what it means to even just be like, hey, do you want to come for lunch? And for anyone who's listening, if anyone's listening to this story about me missing lunch, I'm a lot better now, right? It's easier. I could go and get this thing, but it still requires planning, and it still is, I got to gather all of her medical stuff. We got to get going. But there was just a really real moment of me of being, it kind of felt like I don't belong. My life doesn't belong to these other people's normal. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. I think that, like, because I remember feeling that way too. I think it's like this really scary feeling of being like, my own mother doesn't know what this is like. Like, I can't go to her to ask, like with the feeding tube, like, the first time she fed Kimball with the feeding tube, she was so nervous, and like, she was like shaking while she was trying to do it because I wasn't there. And like, just the idea of like, my own mom doesn't know how to do this stuff. Like, because like, I think, you look to your parents to be like, how do I change a diaper? Or like these really basic things. Like, they know all the stuff. And then for you to all of a sudden be like, we live completely different lives. Like, she doesn't get what this is like. And I think that, and then, multiply that by like every person, all your friends and your whole family, like no one gets it. That's like, really isolating.
Like, I just felt like, everyone's in the house and I get to just be looking at them through a window. Like, that's as close as we're going to get. Right. Like, but it felt so, it felt like it was just such a moment, like, I'm so alone. Not that you're alone, but you're alone. You can't just call a friend for help. Be like, hey, what do you do when your medically complex kid needs XYZ? They don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes I'll admit, phrases like, all kids are hard kind of gets me sometimes. Like, I understand what we mean, but sometimes it's like, no, but I think you need some more empathy and understand, right? Like what this means for me when I say things are hard.
Yeah.
Like things are, they're just different. But I know that sounds really stupid, but I remember just crying for like 2 hours because I felt like so disconnected from like even my family.
Yeah.
Who had been, like one of my biggest support systems. And I just felt like I need support from other places because I'm not going to find the support I need there. And that doesn't mean they don't support me in other ways, but until you know what I mean when I say, support, someone who understands and someone that empathizes with you because they've walked through it and they can say, I've walked through it. Let me come walk with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were that for me. You were one of the first, maybe you were the first special needs parent that I met, like after Kimball. He was like 3 months old, I think, and you came over, and that was really great to be like feeding tubes and
oh yeah, that's right.
sectioning, and like I don't know, it was really great to just
learn, just little things like how you can turn the volume off the feeding pump. Such a small thing, but I'm like,
oh my gosh, that's true. You told me about that.
That
was such a lifesaver.
We could do this.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me?
Oh, I forgot about that.
So stupid.
But it was like kind of life changing.
It is something as much as I didn't know a feeding pump could do that. Was so like, I can't believe it. Oh yeah. Gosh. Well, I'm glad we got that figured out.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of wrap up with how you feel like you have changed. So you talk about that moment when you found out that things were not typical with Claire. So, and like the before and after, how do you feel like you have evolved, like how you have changed as a person?
So, I remember when Claire was like a month old. I don't remember where I saw this or read it, but I remember like reading this and it said, your mess is going to be the message someone needs one day. And that's kind of what I think this journey with Claire has been. And, these past 4 years and all the things I've learned. I'm not saying, oh, I'm a hero and everyone come to me. I have so much to give you, but I just feel like it has changed me, first in ways to be more open and to share struggles and trials. I think oftentimes, especially with social media, right, we're being told to put up these perfect lives where, your life is perfection and nothing can go wrong. And that's great. But we don't learn and we don't connect with each other through perfect lives, right? I'm sorry to say I don't really connect with the girl who's got a perfect figure and a perfect closet and a perfect husband and has never had a problem in her life. I have nothing to talk to that girl about. Right? But, those of us who have been through trials, there's something human about sharing your trials. And I think in that I've made deeper connections with other people emotionally, spiritually. And so that's been really great. I feel like my faith has been more real. That definitely grows. I know that sounds crazy because a lot of people, I think, tend to, the opposite sometimes happens. Like, this terrible thing happened to me. I don't believe in God anymore because XYZ. But for the opposite happened to me, where I felt like I kind of just developed a more real relationship, in my opinion, like between me and God. I was kind of like, so my faith deepened. I feel like my biggest thing is I've become a more empathetic person. I feel like I'm able to understand people who are hurting more. I feel like I'm able to maybe say the right things much better than I used to. I'm able to, I feel like, understand other people's sorrows and And I feel like maybe little things I've been like, well, I'm not going to, be excited about this small little thing my kid does. But I find because of her terminal diagnosis, the little things she does bring me so much more joy than I would ever have thought they did. So although, I know it sounds so grim, and I know I was like so emotional earlier. I know it sounds so grim, and like, how can you have a great life? But in some ways, my life has become even more joyful because I'm so grateful for all that I've been given. And I feel like I have learned to stand up for myself, which is a big one. I feel like, in the beginning, maybe I was more shy. I mean, like, oh, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't mean I'm going around hitting people in the face or telling them they're stupid or right. But I'm, like you said, I've learned to be more aggressive. Like I'm unapologetic about the things that will make Claire's life great. Right. Like, nope, this makes it great. I feel like I can be like, talk to a doctor, like, hey, nope, this is what it is. This isn't what it is. So I'm more confident as myself, like, to build confidence in myself and to stand up for myself. And I'm like, I'm not taking anyone's BS. I'm like, nope. And also I feel like I've made some real friendships as well. And that's been a really great blessing too. Some like real friendships that are based on some like really hard things, but they're very real friendships. So those are little ways that I've definitely think I have evolved as a person. And I don't know if I would have learned all these life lessons so quickly. Otherwise, maybe I would have gathered some of these later in life, but I think these last 4 years, it's really, been a fire under my butt. And like kind of forced me to evolve. And to be an advocate for Claire and for what she needs.
I think that rapid growth is so painful. Like the learning curve is just like, but like, but I totally relate with that, where it's like, I feel like I was going to die, but now I'm okay. And I can see all these improvements, on a personal level because of it.
I don't think at any other time in your life, you're going to see like why you grew, right? Like in your life, but people are like, whoa, when I was 80 years old, I realized when I was 20, that was a really great thing. But now I'm like, oh no, I see that thing that happened to me 1 year ago has really changed my life already. And
that's so cool.
And like you said, caused me to evolve, but it's necessary. You need to change or else you're not going to make it. Right. You need to learn, grow, and develop those skills.
And like build the muscle, like get stronger and tougher.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I love that. It's so true.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. That was like, oh, so amazing. I loved hearing about how you've changed and just your whole journey with Claire. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
As usual, you can find photos of Claire and her family on the website. You can also follow Katie on Instagram at Katie B. Peterson, and that is Peterson spelled S-O-N. You can like my Facebook page, The Rare Life Podcast, for sneak peeks about episodes coming up. Don't miss Katie's special topic episode released next Thursday, as she talks all about anticipatory grief, as she's experienced it with Claire. She shares more about what a terminal diagnosis has meant for her in her life, as well as advice for those experiencing anticipatory grief and advice for the rest of us on how to approach and help people dealing with this. Don't miss it. See you then.